Welcome back to another Your Tech Report video. Today, we're going to recap everything that Microsoft announced at their Surface event, their Surface Fall event. Lots of exciting stuff coming out of Microsoft. Just today, moments ago, the event wrapped up, and we're here to talk about all the announcements that came out of the Surface event. So many cool things, starting with the Surface Pro 8. We've got the Surface Laptop Studio. We've got the Surface Pro X, the Surface Go 3, Surface Duo 2. So let's recap them all. We're not going to go into great detail because we're still waiting on pricing and availability, but the Surface Pro 8 is probably the most exciting one here. Well, maybe the most exciting one here, because it is the biggest redesign in that Surface Pro 8 tablet kind of two-in-one form factor that we've seen in quite some time. So what's different about it? Well, number one, the overall size and footprint isn't that much different. They've got a bit more rounded edges going on there. You've still got that kickstand design that lets you hold it upright or make it flat, almost like a little studio kind of tablet that you can write on. But this is an extremely powerful device. It's got a new 13-inch Pixel Sense display that can go up to 120 hertz in terms of refresh rate. This means, much like the recent iPhones we saw, it can ramp up when it needs to and ramp down when it doesn't, thus saving battery life overall. Overall dimensions, 11.3 inches by 8.2 inches and 0.37 inches thick. This is a really thin device, just under 2 pounds. So not as light as some of the other tablets that we've seen, but don't forget you're getting incredible power in a device like this, including cooling. So let's talk about that power for a second. You can start with an i5 processor if you want to just kind of entry-level device and you're doing day-to-day kind of handiwork, web browsing and email, etc., or you can go up to an i7 processor with Wi-Fi, LTE options, all 11th generation Intel processors. So you're getting a quad-core device or a dual-core if you want to go down for those i5s. What else? Intel UHD graphics, Intel Iris Xe graphics, depending on which model you choose from. You can configure it with up to 32 gigabytes of RAM. And new to this line of Surface devices is a replaceable solid-state storage device. So it's removable. You can go and configure it with 512 gigs, for example. Let's see, 128, 256, 100 and 512 or 1 terabyte, depending on the model you choose from. You can go 128 or 256 gig on the Wi-Fi or LTE, and Wi-Fi only can go up to 1 terabyte, but you'll be able to upgrade this down the road. So if you do want to, you have that option, unlike the older models, which only had a micro SD card, which is pretty cool. You've got Wi-Fi 6, you've got 2 USB-C ports with Thunderbolt 4, the headphone jack is still there if you want to use it. You've got the Surface Connect port, which is meant for your charging, but also for expansion. If you have a dock, it's compatible with the Surface Dial, if you remember that really cool device that was launched with the original Surface Studio. Everything you can expect from a tablet is on board. What else? You've got incredible microphone array, dual far-field studio mics, 2-watt stereo speakers with great Dolby Atmos sound and Dolby Vision support. The cameras are upgraded across the board. The front-facing camera still has Windows Hello. It's a 5-megapixel front-facing camera with 1080p full HD video, so your video calls are going to be much better on this device than the previous model. And on the back of the device, a 10-megapixel rear-facing camera with 1080p HD video and 4K as well, if you want to go that way as well. Where do we go next? How about we talk about the Surface Pro X? Surface Pro X is a really sleek device. It's designed to compete with kind of the modern day tablets out there. It's got all the accelerometers, gyroscope, magnetometer, ambient light sensor, but it's got that same 13-inch form factor. So you get this really big screen, you've got that pen support, you've got that kickstand in the back, but it runs on Microsoft's own ARM processor. So this is the SQ1 or the SQ2 processor. Now, if we've learned anything from ARM processors, don't dismiss them, because we saw what Apple's done in the M1, and these are incredibly powerful chips that really far exceed expectations. However, in previous generations of this device, they haven't really exceeded many expectations, and because we're running on ARM, we have to run a special version of Windows, which hasn't been very compatible with, previous generations of software. Although this one, you can configure up to 16 gigs of RAM, you've got removable storage as well, up to 512 gigs, but of course removable, so you can change that. LTE version, as well as just a Wi-Fi only version. No Thunderbolt on board this one, but you get 2 USB Gen 2 ports, USB-C Gen 2 ports, Surface Connect port, nano SIM slot for the LTE version. You're getting a great 13-inch pixel sense display. You're getting 1.7 pounds of actual weight on this device, so it's on the lighter side compared to the other Surface. Overall specs in terms of the dimensions of this device, 11.3 by 8.2 by 0.28 inches thick. So it's very similar to the new Surface Pro 8 in terms of dimensions, but you just don't get that same power as you do with the Intel Core stuff. Now, let's talk about Surface Laptop Studio. Lots of power on board. You've got quad-core Intel 11th gen processors, i5, i7 options, but you've got discrete graphics on board this device, which is really cool, and that's what really differentiates it from everything else. Plus, built-in keyboard and a screen that pivots in so many different ways. You can have it almost presentation mode where it's right in front of you. You can flatten it down on top of the keyboard to cover the keyboard entirely, and you can draw on it like a tablet. This is really meant for designers and people out there who are using that pen and really taking advantage of that form factor. So as I said, you can get the 11th gen, of course, Intel processors. On the graphics side of things, this is where it's pretty cool because you've got NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3050 Ti in a laptop, and it's a laptop version of the GPU, but you got 4 gigs of GDDR6 memory on board. The commercial version has a different processor there, a different GPU. That's the NVIDIA RTX 8000 GPU, so little options that are a bit different there. Up to 32 gigs of RAM, removable solid-state storage up to 2 terabytes currently, and you get up to 18 or 19 hours of battery life, depending on how you configure this. Of course, you're going to get Bluetooth 5.1. Of course, you're going to get a Wi-Fi 6. Of course, you're going to get 2 USB 4.0 and Thunderbolt 4 ports, 3.5 millimeter headphone jack on board, and the Surface Connect port. Lots of really cool features on this device. The front-facing camera is a Windows Hello camera. It's got 1080p resolution for that front-facing camera, dual far-field mics. Everything you saw on the Surface Pro 8, everything we just talked about, you're going to find on this, plus, of course, that keyboard, and everything's in the base. So you've got better cooling and better airflow, which make this a super powerhouse, especially for those creatives. Again, 3 modes. Laptop mode, where you're just holding it up in a laptop. You've got stage mode, which is when you could pull the screen towards you. You could use it for gaming or just watching stuff. And then studio mode is when you flatten it down and you use it as a tablet, which is very cool. Surface Go 3 is the smaller form factor Surface. Still a great device. I call this the high school kind of entry-level Surface device because it is on the cheaper side and the smaller side. So it starts under $1,000. You get a 10.5-inch pixel sense display. You've got an adjustable kickstand, just like the other Surface devices. Windows 11, more speed. Starting with an Intel Core i3 processor, you can go all the way up to an i7 processor if you want to configure it that way. But at that point, why aren't you getting a new Surface Pro 8? Dimensions overall on this device, you've got a 10.5-inch screen, so that's in a 9.65 inches by 6.9 inches by 0.33 inches thick. So it's super portable, Wi-Fi, LTE if you want it, quad-core Intel processor, 10th generation though of the i3 processor, Intel UHD graphics on board, only 8 gigs of RAM in terms of, configurability, so you can do 4 gigs or 8 gigs. You've got options in terms of storage. You've got 64 gig, 128 gig, or 256 gigs non-replaceable on this device, which is the difference. Again, Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth I talked about, LTE if you want to get the LTE version. Of course, you'll get 1 USB-C port, no Thunderbolt, 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, 1 Surface connector port. You got a micro SD XC card reader, so you can actually plug your micro SD into that to get expandable storage if you want there as well, and LTE Advanced with a nano SIM tray. This really is that kind of entry-level point. I call it that high school kind of college student device because it's under $1,000, so if it is lost or stolen or something, that it's not going to be as bad as a $3,000 laptop. Very cool, of course, has every feature of a tablet that you'd expect: ambient light sensor, accelerometer, gyroscope, magnetometer, NFC on board this as well, which is pretty cool, so you can use it for various things that support NFC. On the student side, you've got cards and various access things that you might want to use with NFC, and of course, it'll support Windows 11, so you've got that Windows 11 S mode, but you can always upgrade that to full Windows 11 Home or Windows 11 Pro as well. Finally, guys, let's talk about the Surface Duo 2. Okay, This is a really, really sexy device, and hopefully we'll see this hit the market sooner than we saw it happen last time, because what happened was almost 4 years ago they announced the Surface Duo, and then it took about 2 years to get to market, and at that point it was still using older processors. Well, that's different, because we've got 2 screens on this device, we've got 5G on this device, we've got a really cool matte black color, we've got a camera system that's now upgraded, and it's worthy to compete with any other smartphone out there. But the dual screen is what really sets this apart. And the way that Microsoft is doing dual screen, I think really is the benchmark that everybody should be doing this. 2 5.8-inch AMOLED screens side by side. But what's done differently this year is you've got an infinity edge on the inside. So it curves on the inside and the screen curves around with it. What that gives you is when you want to, you get an almost seamless image across both screens, which gives you 8.3 inches of AMOLED display diagonally. With a very, very, very cool and very, very bright screen. You're getting a wide color gamut. You're getting displays of 90 hertz refresh rate, 800 nits of max brightness across the board. You've got Gorilla Glass protecting the screen. A really, really cool device. Now, because they've got both sides to work with, they can really ramp up the battery life on this. You've got 4,449 milliamps of battery power, and you could charge it up to 80% in just under an hour, which is pretty cool. Let's talk about the camera system. Now, on the back of the device, we do have a camera bump, so you'll lose that really sleek form factor across the board. It's still super slim, and you've still got that incredible hinge, but you got the camera bump. Of course, cases will compensate for that, so don't worry about that. So what 3 cameras you got here? You got a wide-angle camera with a 12-megapixel sensor and a f1.7 aperture. You've got a telephoto 12 megapixel with a f2.4 aperture. It's kind of like a 51 millimeter equivalent. And then you've got the ultra wide 16 megapixel camera with an f2.2 aperture and 13 millimeter. So you've got a great camera system on this device, which is what the previous generation was definitely lacking, and really what helps set this apart. You've got HDR on board. You've got dedicated night mode photography. You know, you've got smooth zoom between the cameras. All those things that you didn't have on the previous version of the Surface Duo are now here, including 4K video recording at 30 and 60 frames per second, 1080p video recording at 30 and 60, and slow-mo at 120 or even 240 frames per second. Wi-Fi's been upgraded to Wi-Fi 6. You've got that on board. You've got 5G millimeter wave, depending on obviously where you get the device, but also 5G across the board and compatibility for worldwide bands of not only LTE, but LTE Advanced and 5G. And of course, in terms of storage and capacity, we can go up to 512 gigs of storage, obviously as down as 128 if you want to. You've got 8 gigs of RAM, so they really lay it out there in terms of what you got. And it runs on the Android 11 operating system. Soon to be available, obviously, Android 12, which gives you access to all the Microsoft apps, but also the Google Play Store. So you can download any app and really customize this to your choosing. Lots of really cool things on this device. I'm really looking forward to putting this one to the test, because it kind of blends that tablet-y type smartphone, but not necessarily a laptop feel of things. If you want to get work done, you could, but you're not going to sit here and edit Word documents or work on spreadsheets for anything longer than some quick annotations here and there. But in terms of note-taking, in terms of using this as a mobile device, in terms of getting things done quickly if you need to, I've done remote desktop, I've done gaming on this, cloud gaming on it, really, really cool, and that's on the older generation, so I can just imagine what this new one brings to the table. Guys, obviously we're going to get our hands on all these devices because Microsoft always delivers. I cannot wait to get my hands on all of them. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Which one are you most excited for? Do that down below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, and give us a thumbs up if you like this video, because it helps us to know that you like the content and we can bring you more. That is everything announced at this year's Surface event. I hope you enjoyed this video. We will catch you on the next one.